welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. I'm Doug Keck, your host. Our special guest author, Frank J. Hanna, author of A Graduate's Guide to Life, published by Beacon Publishing. 3 things they don't teach you in college that could make all the difference. Welcome, Frank, to EWTN's Bookmark.
It's great to be with you, Doug.
Thank
you for having me.
Good to see you again. Yeah, yes. People don't realize behind the scenes you've had a lot of involvement with EWTN and very supportive over the many, many years. I think the first time you might have been on EWTN that I remember, you were on with Raymond Arroyo many years ago.
I was on with Raymond. That's exactly right. Yes.
Exactly.
So, no, EWTN provides a service unlike any other in the church throughout the world. So
now,
it's wonderful.
It's interesting because the first time I saw you was kind of more related to financial kinds of things like that before. This is more about education, but it's interesting because you really use your financial background and your experience there to basically talk about what's important in life in this book.
Yeah, you know, I've found, and in fact in my business career, part of creating value for the marketplace is to try to think, what do people need? What can I provide to them that's valuable to them? And that requires looking beneath surface cliches about what people need. And so I happen to be at a stage of life when my daughter was graduating from college. All of her friends are graduating from college. And I started looking beneath the surface of what so many parents and grandparents and people who love these kids, what they were telling them.
Right.
Because we all deal in cliches every day. That's how we get through life.
Right.
But young people hear what we tell them. And some of those cliches, I think, lead them in the wrong way.
And the one you seem to focus on, oh, this is going to be the best time of your life or the best years of your life kind of a thing. And why isn't that true? I mean, a lot of people look at it and say, well, when I was a kid and I had no worries. You go to college, and especially today, most universities that people, if they have any means at all, it's a very nice place.
It is a very nice place.
Places to stay at are very nice. Yes, they have wonderful sports programs.
Yes.
And you're there. You don't have large responsibilities necessarily. In some cases, people look and say, this is the last time you're going to be able to kind of have a good time without having all the worries that happen as you get married and have kids, etc.
That's right.
So why is that bad advice?
Well, it's funny because the specific thing that they tell their kids when they're leaving high school is, enjoy them. These will be the best 4 years of your life.
Right.
And it's hazardous for a couple of reasons. First of all, we put an incredible amount of pressure on our graduates. Because they go away to college thinking, well, everybody I know, and by the way, when I speak to college graduates or college kids and I tell them, how many of you heard those words? Every hand goes up.
Sure.
Every hand goes up. Okay?
And you mentioned that in the book.
Yeah,
right.
and so the problem is now there's this pressure. Well, everybody I know has told me this is sort of life at a different dimension, life at a different level. I better really blow it out. I mean, the expectation is this is as good as it gets. That also sets us up with a mindset that for some reason life peaks at age 21, 22, and the next 50 years are downhill. And I just think in a way it's a terrible thing.
Do you think that's why sometimes we see levels of despair in young people we hadn't seen before?
Absolutely. Yes, because there is so much pressure now. So many kids go visit 8, 10 colleges before they go, as if I must make the best choice. Look, there's a lot of colleges you can go to. You don't even have to go to college, okay? Many maybe ought not to, but this idea that I must pick the exact right college and perform the exact correct rituals and have the exact college experience, or somehow I must have failed because everyone told me this is it.
This is the time to be. Well, you're saying to me 3 things they don't teach you in college. First of all, I want to ask you how you came up with 3. Second of all, did they ever teach it in college?
That's a very interesting question. Has it ever been taught? I do believe that there are, always have been and are today, professors who are actually interested in imparting wisdom to their students. Mostly, however, our higher education system engages in credentialing. In other words, giving some sort of certificate that then tells an employer you're worthy, okay? Some kind of credentialing, and the transmission of information.
Right, and it also allows me as the employer to hire somebody with a credential that allows me to justify why I hired this person in case it doesn't work out.
Yes, so we have this whole process where we all cover ourselves with the right credentials, okay? The employer, the employee. the real idea of an education is to create a fully realized human being, okay, who has wisdom for what leads to life's happiness. So I think there have been elements of it in the typical college education, but I think we've lost sight of a lot.
Now you say, this is a little bit of a cookbook here you've got here. You got a recipe in the beginning. 3 things: reality, dealing with competition, and wealth. And we can talk about those because it's interesting. Those are kinds of buzzwords that aren't very popular in the culture, let alone many times in the church. And here we are on EWTN. You know, when people talk about competition and wealth, it's not exactly usually viewed positively in a lot of ways. And you don't view it positively in the way people misunderstand it, and that's the point of your book. But this was the thing you said: I've worked with leaders as diverse as presidents and popes. How are they the same and how are they different when you dealt with them?
Oh, well, generally speaking, I think people reflect their deepest values. And so I actually worked on some projects with Pope John Paul II, St. John Paul II, Pope Benedict, and a little bit with Pope Francis. You know, I think of Pope Benedict, who I had a lot of exposure to. He manifests in every encounter with him where his deepest values are. And the fact of the matter is that's true for presidents, that's true for people on Wall Street, that's true for people in the financial world I'm in. People manifest that deepest value, and in a way that deepest value becomes their perceived reality. So the question then becomes, how close is your perceived reality
to the actual
reality?
Which is your original chapter, your understanding of reality.
Because I've found, you know, I quote Joseph Youngman, who
a Czech poet.
A Czech poet, who gave the best. I've been involved in education for many years. He gave the best definition of education I've ever seen, and that is that education is the process of introducing a person to reality. If we don't have a good sense of reality, you can't make any prudent decision.
Would you make the case today, many times in universities and things, with, in a sense, the lifestyle and kind of what's created in the world, its own little world on campus, and maybe we even see it sometimes when people complain about this, the university with speech codes and things, and we talk about bubbles and snowflakes, that we're almost doing the exact opposite of what you're saying we should be doing.
See, ideology says, I have a theory about how I would like the world to work. That is my ideology, and I want to impart my ideology. Now, there may be elements of an ideology that are accurate, but an ideology is not grounded in this world in which we live. It's utopian. And so, you know, while on the one hand, education is a process of introducing a person to reality, T.S. Eliot said, humankind can only bear so much reality. Reality's tough. Reality is sometimes painful. And so what we all do a little bit, we delude ourselves.
That's Bert Norton from the Four Quartets.
Absolutely, for T.S. Eliot, yes. And so we all delude I can't say for you, I delude myself a little. I tell myself little, you know, because I want to get through the day.
There was a line in a movie one time where somebody talked about, I don't have to have a drink of water every day, but I can't go one day without one juicy rationalization to get through life. So, I mean, it kind of plays into that.
We all do that. However, every time we divorce ourselves from reality, well, that was just a little white lie. Okay, call it what you will. It wasn't the truth. Every time we slip away from the truth.
Those little venial sins build us up and make it easier to make the mortal sins.
Exactly. And so what we do, every time we remove ourselves from reality, this is what I noticed with Pope Benedict. He was so grounded in the reality of Jesus of Nazareth. You know, it's one thing to have this flowery religion with precepts. It's another thing to believe that a man was born 2,000 years ago and lived in Galilee and did. It's either a reality for us or it's not.
Exactly.
But there are many things as we go through life. Like you've said, in college, there's so many competing ideologies now that aren't rooted in reality. They're rooted in what we wish the world looked like. Rather than what the world really is.
You say that, and more palatable even if it's wrong. You know, that idea that I'm looking for that, and people would rather delude themselves than face reality. Don't go to the doctor because I might find out something bad, etc. like that. Also, I'm wondering, because you talk about wealth and getting ahead, or what that really means. And I think about colleges and universities, where sometimes you wonder whether the goal is education or filling up the classrooms and getting the money to keep the institution going. And so the institution moves away from its prime principle, which was to educate, to survival.
Yes. Well, and so we have in America, one of the things, so you asked earlier about how did I get three things. Well, really, I found there were three sort of myths that we almost bombard college students with, that I want to say to them, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not right, and that's not right. And one of them is this myth that the way you get happy in life is to get ahead. And we teach, especially our college kids, okay, starting in first grade, I want you to get the best grade, okay? I want you to do this. It is all oriented around a ranking. And in fact, you mentioned about the way the colleges behave. Well, of course they do, because U.S. News and World Report ranks them. Now, tell me, the difference between the 37th best state university and the 41st?
Well, the only one I can testify is that in Alabama, clearly Auburn is the #1 university. That's the only thing I really want to about.
As someone from Georgia, I don't wade into that one. But they are competing, and you know what? We have a notion that as Americans, because we're kind of a competitive country, okay? We like to say we're the #1 country. The World Cup's about to begin. Everyone wants to be #1. Competition can bring out the best in people, but this idea that competition is this unalloyed good and that the way to be happy is to compete and to win, I don't think it's true.
Would you really root for the other team to make the basket? Do you really do that
I
in
give
your
an
life?
example in the book. Here's what I do.
So when your Georgia Bulldogs are playing somebody and somebody's running to the end zone, you hope that Alabama player gets in, or you hope he falls down and doesn't get in?
You hope that everybody performs to their best. Okay. I use an example in the book about someone standing at a foul line when he's shooting a foul shot. Do you hope he misses it? Because generally speaking, the players
of course you
make
do.
foul. No, well, everybody does.
All the fans want him to miss it.
And yet, why would we wish someone who's done no harm to us to perform poorly? Because that's.
But if he scores that basket, I'm going to feel bad.
But that's not the purpose of competition. That's why we have to reroute.
Well, that's true, right?
The purpose of competition is to bring out the best in everyone. I mean, everything we do in our human life ought to make us more human. So the question is, does it make you more human to wish misfortune on someone else, or to wish they do well? Tiger Woods actually taught me this. Tiger Woods, of all people.
Yeah, you disavow some of his actions in the book, but you do
Tiger
mention,
Woods but everybody, Tiger's in a process of redemption now.
Right. Everybody's.
Tiger said, and he was in a playoff with one of his competitors. They said, "Were you hoping he'd make the?" They said, "What were you thinking when he lined up the putt?" He said, "I was hoping he'd make it," and the reporter was incredulous. What? And Tiger said, "Of course. When you're competing, you want the other person playing his best." So now I do play golf.
Right.
And we have a little bet, right? A little game. And when the other guy's putting, I have a habit now. As he's lining up the putt, I say, I hope he makes it. Now you could say, do you really mean it? Not always, but guess what? Saying it is the beginning of it. And when I actually can hope that my competitor plays well, it makes me better.
So let me ask you, from an educational perspective, because you're talking about competition, but yet the other side, we end up with everybody gets an award for just being there. You're not saying that,
That's
are you?
not competition. No, that's not competition. No. That is a exhibit. That's an exhibition, okay? Like in the World Cup, they have what they call the friendlies, okay? They're not really competing, they're just playing, okay? No. What I'm saying, though, is in so many things that we think that if we win, we will be happy. Now, LeBron James is the greatest basketball player, maybe of all time, but certainly right now. And he was interviewed this past season saying, during the season, he's borderline miserable because his entire happiness, his entire self-worth rides with every game.
How well he does.
So this idea that the way to be happy is to win competitions, I maintain no. The way to be happy is to have an abundance of blessing. So, do I want to compete? Should my wife and I compete for our child's affection?
Right. I thought that was an interesting point you made.
I don't want to compete for my child's
Competing
affection.
in your family, right.
Yeah, and guess
Do
what?
people do that? Do you see people who've done that?
Well, that's what sibling rivalry is all about.
Okay.
The first
You and
murder
your
in
brother,
history.
right?
The first murder in history was Cain and Abel.
Right. And you and your brother, right?
My
First
brother and I,
25 years?
we competed. We've worked together for the last 25 years. For the first 25 years of our lives, we competed all the time. And you know what? It's like brothers. They're at one another.
But didn't that hone your skills at the same time?
Wait, competition can be, but particularly when it's with people you like, you can compete. I'm not saying competition is bad.
Right.
I'm saying you must do it with love, and you must do it with prudence. And that may seem odd. Wait, compete with love? Yes. If I'm competing with my brother, I need to love him. I need to wish the best for him. Love. We think of love as Romeo and Juliet. Love is wishing the best. I can love you. I can wish the best for you.
Right.
When I'm competing, if I'm not wishing the best for someone else, which is actually an act of love,
Right.
okay, I'm becoming a selfish animal. Every mammal in the animal kingdom competes.
Right, you talk about that.
They compete, but they're animals and they're vicious.
You say, unfortunately, when competition is missing love, it becomes more like war. We can be seen in the language surrounding so many of our sporting events today, and who wants to be at war all the time or thinks that being at war makes one happy or successful? Well, we think of Alinsky and what we see in politics today, because it is all about the politics, legitimately, of destroying the other person.
Yes, yes. And the notion is, well, if you won, then that's okay, because the ultimate objective in our modern cultural mindset is that winning is the objective, no matter what. The problem is there are competitions, and this is why prudence is needed. There are competitions where you can win, but in order to win, you got to sacrifice your integrity. So you can either win and sacrifice your integrity, or you can maintain your integrity and lose, or you can walk away.
Right. Is that the guy who was drafted ahead of Derek Jeter and said maybe he would have used
He said
steroids?
he wished he'd use steroids. Well, part of why I bring
What
that
I really want to know reading that is, who's the guy who drafted that guy instead of Derek Jeter? And is he still working today in baseball?
Well, part of the reason I bring him up, see, it was real easy during this financial crisis to say, oh, all these greedy Wall Streeters. Right. If they had just not been so greedy, what they really were, greed was certainly involved. What they really were, because I watched this happen, they were competitive. So I quote Charles Prince in the book. He was the president of Citicorp.
Is that when the music plays you dance?
That they asked him, why did you keep throwing on risk? It wasn't greed. He said, when the music plays you dance. People get involved in competitions in which everyone else is doing this. And so I point out, look, it's not just Wall Street. It's baseball,
right,
where he's using steroids. If I'm going to keep up, I got to use steroids, okay? It's college entrance exams.
Yeah.
When people take extra doses of Ritalin there's a black market for this in college dorms, to get Ritalin when you've got exams, okay? Everybody wants a little bit
that edge,
more edge, okay? Parents want it, parents seek it for their kids, and the kids watch it, and they realize, wow, mom and dad are going to a lot of trouble to make sure I win.
Do you think sometimes some of that is also the fact that we have smaller families, and so there's more of an investiture in a family in the one or two kids
Absolutely.
they may have,
yes,
rather than when you maybe have 5 or 6 or 7 kids, and not that it would be, but you just don't have the ability to be that focused.
Yeah, I think that is right, but added to that is the fact that in large families, so there's always been sibling rivalry, okay? Again, watch a litter of kitties. They all are fighting for mama.
Right, and there's
okay?
a runt.
Okay, so that's always happened. But among human beings, in large families, you know what? You have to learn to share. You have to learn that you don't come first all the time. So some of it is, you're right, the parents can focus on the one kid. But the other is, the 1 or 2 children don't have as much of a chance to realize, okay, it's fine to compete, but this win at all cost is not going to get it in a family with 5 or 6 kids. It's right. going to be hard. It doesn't happen like that. Those rough edges get smoothed away. So yeah, I think it is a bigger issue today because of that.
You say pride won't make you successful, it only makes you anxious and desperate. And you talk about pride being a sin. So pride is a big part of what you see going on.
Oh, I think in the competitive field, absolutely. And you can watch. I don't believe our modern culture defines pride as a sin. I think we define it as a virtue. I'm proud of this. I'm proud to say I did this. I'm proud to say I did this. And I understand there's some affirmation and some, but yes, I think we start judging ourselves and others by what we have achieved. St. John Paul II said we need to move from being a culture of doing to a culture of being. And so I think as soon as we head down that competitive path, if we're not achieving something new and spectacular every day, well, I must be failing.
Right.
I must be something less. And the most important things in life, you know, what achievements have I had with my wife over the last year? I mean, I love her to death. We're about to have a big anniversary coming up, but I can't point to achievements.
Right.
And yet it's one of the greatest sources of happiness on earth.
Right. In fact, you make the point that you think when it comes to dealing with billionaires and people like that, as you found, you know, some are happy, some aren't happy, but money has nothing to do with whether they're happy or not. And you were pointing to actually their marriages, right?
That the most common denominator. And I sit on some boards where, I mean, look, billionaires, it's hard to even imagine somebody having that much money. But I know some of these folks, okay? And I've watched and I've thought, what is the common denominator of their happiness? And most often, the ones who are happily married are happy. And if they're not happily married, it kind of doesn't matter how many boats and cars and helicopters. They don't tend to be happy. You know, part of so moving away from competing, the idea is where can I go where I get abundance?
Right. You talk about abundance and you say, I don't want most of my life filled with competition. If I want to be happy, I want it filled with abundance. This is the new paradigm for wealth. I don't want to win a competition. I want a shower of blessings, a shower of good things. Well, that sounds wonderful. What does that mean?
Well, when I go play with my grandson, okay, I have an abundance, and he has an abundance. He's got all of me, I've got all of him, and we're together in this little relationship of joy. Who am I competing with for that? Who is he competing with? Now, as he has more brothers, he might have to compete for a little bit of my attention, and it will be my job to teach him how to welcome the little brother into the circle. That will actually make him happy.
It's not a zero-sum game.
It's not a zero-sum game. But what we always have is we are mammals. We are animals, and we compete just like the tigers and the lions and the giraffes, okay, for food and mates and water and the other things it takes to survive. But we're human beings. And so the question is, how do we compete and yet draw out our humanity rather than the animal?
You say when you create value for others, you'll receive value in return. It's the law of the universe. Oddly enough, it is actually easier to figure out what others value and provide that than it is to figure out what we ourselves ought to value.
Yeah, figuring out what we ought to value. We marvel with sensations, but we all know sometimes you can see the speck in the other person's eye without seeing the log in your own. Well, we can see what other people need, and we can provide it to them. And so one of the things I tell young college graduates is, if you want to have a thriving career, that first job you go into, every day come to the job thinking, how can I create more value for my employer? Let me tell you something. Everyone who's ever done that, maybe in the history of the universe, gets promoted. They're valued because people realize, wow, they're constantly trying to seek how to serve the business rather than what they can get out of it.
Right.
Employers love people like that. Anybody I've ever hired who tried to create value for the business, I just kept promoting them.
Why not? It's a win-win, as they would say.
And you love it, but again, if we're competing, we're thinking, okay, how can I extract more? How can I extract more? And not only does it leads to anxiety.
Right.
It doesn't lead to happiness.
Do you still have a money-making hat?
Yeah, I do spend some time. I do. It actually helps kind of keep my mind sharp. So as you know, I spend a lot of time on things within the church and nonprofit activities. But I'll tell you, one of the things I spend a lot of time on in the money-making world now is businesses that will bring good to people. There's a lot of stuff happening in the healthcare field. There's a lot of stuff happening in education. These are things people need, and we need good, profitable, innovative businesses to serve people.
Now, you've been talking to young people involved with education for many, many years. Is it different today than it was when you first started?
I think a little bit. I think what's different today is that most people getting out of high school and in college are far more aware of the world just because of the media. Okay, so when you and I were going away to college, we'd had 3 television channels or whatever.
Right.
So I think their awareness of what's going on in the world. However, our brains only have so much processing power, and so the amount of news stories they've heard. This is true for adults too, okay? I think if we're going to have some wisdom crammed into our heads, we got to take out some of the constant news feed that we're feeding into ourselves because there's only so much room. And so what I find with the kids is they don't tend to have had as much quiet time. They don't tend to have had as much time when they might have been bored. Because sometimes when you're bored is when you start to look at the world in a different way. You know, I can remember as a kid being nothing to do in the afternoon. So we'd create games.
Especially in the summer or something.
Yes, exactly.
When you were a kid,
and I think sometimes it might be good to just have a little bit of vacant time that's not scheduled for anything. And I think there is less of that today among kids in college.
Okay, very good. The title of the book, A Graduate's Guide to Life, 3 Things They Don't Teach You in College That Can Make All the Difference. And there's some secrets in here we didn't get to. You have to get the book. Beacon Publishing, available through our EWTN Religious Catalog, EWTNRC.com. A pleasure to see you, Frank. Thank you so much.
Great to see you, too.
For a lot of insights in this book. Check it out and join us next time right here on EWTN's Bookmark. Thanks for being here.